Yeah, absolutely. There is a connective thread to all of those things,
Uh-huh.
because they seem to be on the surface, they seem very different.
Oh, yeah, a
But
little bit, but
yeah,
yeah,
but there
just
is a connective thread. So,
how things.
whether
Right.
I'm tackling technology and search or marketing or human behavior, or rather, sorry, decision making, or in this case, fitness, right?
Mm-hmm.
the, 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 the thread behind everything is us, how we behave. Why do we do the things we do? Why don't we do the things we should do? And if you ask that, then you realize that essentially there are some things which are fundamental to all of us, both good and bad,
Mm-hmm.
and they're expressed differently through the different interfaces we use to do what we do. And when we understand that, then we have the ability or the capability to actually become better because we understand our own operating system better in a way. And this is no different to marketing or search or business or life or fitness or whatever it is. So it's fascinating when this happens.
You're listening to Were You Still Talking? Hey, welcome back. This is Were You Still Talking? In my studio, well, on my Zoom today, I have David Amerland. Is that right? I hope I pronounced that right.
It is absolutely.
Oh, thank you very much. He's a writer focused on how human behavior is shaped by modern forces, especially technology, and how that shift impacts our health, culture, stories. After building a career in marketing and publishing several successful business books, David expanded into the wellness space with Built to Last, a practical guide to health, longevity, and intentional living. So it's got a lot in there. Now also writing fiction, David explores the emotional and psychological impact of modern life through storytelling across all genres. His work investigates how we adapt and sometimes resist, I know what that means, to change in a fast-moving world. What that does to our sense of values, the moral code we create for ourselves, and the societies we build as a result. David, welcome. I'm so nice to have you. So nice that you reached out. How are you?
Joel, thank you so much, and I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you here. And let's start with your latest book, just so I don't get sidetracked too soon.
Okay.
We've already had a nice conversation that I might try and include in the podcast somehow. But so you say it's a practical guide for everyone. I guess let's make it an easy question. How is this different from I think there's 30, 40,000 fitness books that came out?
At least.
Recently?
At the very least. Yeah. And that's probably about, I don't know, 150,000 diet books, right?
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
we have, okay, let's look at the numbers because they actually tell a story in their own right. 40, 50,000 fitness books, hundreds of thousands of diet books. We spend in the States, we spend about $282 billion a year in fitness. Globally,
Right.
we spend about $828 billion a year, every year, right, in fitness. We are inundated by information on how to get fit. There are podcasts, there are YouTube videos. We go on the web, there are hundreds of thousands of articles. And yet, by the year 2050, half the world's population globally is going to be overweight, and a significant number of those are going to be obese. Right now in the United States, 49% of people are overweight. Of those who do exercise, 35% exercise less than 3 times a week, so they're not doing enough. So, we have all this pressure, we have all these means at our fingertips, and it's not working. When something is not working, the fault really doesn't lie in access, it doesn't lie in knowledge, it doesn't lie in government programs or the environment around us trying to tell us what to do. It lies in ourselves at a fundamental level. So basically, this is one of the sparks that became Built to Last. I'm looking at why is this happening? And if we can understand that better, and the book actually explains why this is happening, then we're in a better position to actually do something about it, so we don't become one of the statistics. And I will explain now why it's so difficult to be fit. Well, we resist it.
Right.
We're hardwired to resist it.
Yeah.
And if we say, well, that's ridiculous, right? If you get anybody in the world and you say, would you like to be healthier, stronger? Would you like to be fitter? because it's going to be good for your health. It will help you live longer. You'll be able to be disease-free for most of your life. They'll agree with all that. Nobody's going to say no. And yet, we're disinclined to do the things which we should do. And we're disinclined to do those things because we're hardwired to resist stressors.
Right. Yeah, of course we are.
What we call exercise today is basically a substitute for the life we used to have. If you and I lived 80 years ago, 100 years ago, you'd wake up in the morning, you'd have to walk X amount of kilometers to get something done. You'd be lifting something heavy. You'd be digging a hole somewhere. You'd be climbing some stairs. By the end of the day, the meal which you will have had, which would have been relatively lean, definitely organic.
Right. Even if you were one of the richest people in the country, that would be true.
Yeah.
And you
exactly.
didn't exercise, you would still have healthy food. Yeah.
Yes. Healthy food and a healthy, active lifestyle. That was that. That environment was there. And the further back we go in history, the more active we are. So we get into our world today, and you and I can pretty much easily throughout the day spend maybe 8 hours at our desk looking at a screen. Sometimes in my case, 10.
Wow.
And I have to put an alarm on my watch or on my phone to let me know that, an hour and a half has passed. You need to do something active. Then just stand up, walk outside, come back in again. So we can pretty much spend the entire day sitting down, and at the end of the day, we can go to the refrigerator, which is full with maybe, 15,000 calories, and just get what we want. And in that picture, you begin to understand the problem. And you say, okay, so we have access to all these calories. We have an easy lifestyle. It doesn't actually push us physically. And of course, it doesn't even push us mentally, because those two things go hand in hand.
Right.
And we have the inclination to also do nothing. We know from anthropologists who are embedded in the few hunter-gatherer tribes in the world that are still remote. And what they do basically is they sign off and they spend 6 to 9 months living their life isolated from civilization. And this is what these people who are the closest examples we have to hunter-gatherer societies in the Stone Age. They get up in the morning and they'll have to walk X number of kilometers to get somewhere. They're going to forage for food. They're going to have to hunt for food. They're going to have to dig for some things. They're going to have to carry their possessions or lift things to wherever they're going. And when they get there, they do nothing because they're hardwired to basically seek rest, because their whole life is active. So we understand that this incline.
Okay, so we're already hardwired for that, because I feel as and the more I had a long bit of chronic pain, which I'm starting to get over, but for a long time I was really programmed to seek rest. Like I wasn't sleeping at night and stuff. So my brain just turned to, all I want to do is rest. And it's hard to then get out of that, get back into, because I love exercise. I worked out from the time I was in junior high to where I was in my 40s, and suddenly I had these bizarre pain issues. So I really I really understand how we're hardwired for it. And not only do we have food in the fridge that we can get to, my thing is always, one, it blows me away that the whole world has an overweight and obesity problem, because I always think of it as more of a U.S. problem, because I live in the U.S. and even when you travel to certain states, you see less of it. But so I always think of it more, but it is a worldwide issue. And the fact that we can go to a store and have, my wife and I are always kind of fascinated by, I look at the shelves and go, look how much of this food we would never touch. Yeah. Because it's just terrible food. Not that it's not tasty. It tastes fantastic.
No, it's very tasty, absolutely.
It's very tasty, but it's like, I would never eat that. No nutrition, just empty. Yeah. And
that's the problem. And the picture you paint is compelling. That's exactly right. You can walk into a supermarket, you have to see all these special offers come at you, They are very attractively packaged. They're very sort of there to make you decide to buy these things and consume them. And they're manufactured specifically to activate our plants which process sugar and salt.
Oh, yes.
And we love those things.
Yeah. I just got done doing a sugar fast, and I actually did it on social media, my small social media circle, and challenged other people to do it. I don't think anyone joined, but the amount of people that were cheering me on was a bit surprising. I was like, people were like, yeah, go for it. Don't, it was really helpful. And I was then responsible. I was doing little shorts every day just to keep myself on top of it. But what I was getting at is how hard that was. I don't eat a lot of sugar, but I do eat. This was like, okay, I'm not going to eat more than anything with more than 5 grams of processed sugar in it throughout the day. And that, I mean, even to find that, if you're not just eating meat and vegetables, which would be the best thing, or just vegetables, it's very difficult. It's hard.
And see, I mean, again, you highlight an issue with nutrition that essentially most processed food we have easy access to is basically high in sugar, high in salt, and depending on what it is, high in fat. And we're hardwired to respond positively to these things.
Right.
Because in the past, they were hard to come by, right? I mean, if you came across a honeycomb, you want to consume it all in one go. If you came across a fatty game, which is full of energy, you want to, again, eat as much as possible because that's a rich energy source in an environment that was not rich in energy sources for us. We're not in that environment anymore. We're in a very modern world, which makes part of our life a lot easier. But it also presents us with problems because we're not really wired to respond to it in a sensible way that would help us.
Right. And I've always, I mean, honestly, your book is about combining different facets of fitness, and I'm always a little. What I see happening a lot is books that are about. Here's a book about weightlifting, and it'll have a little teeny chapter. Even Arnold's original Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, it had a little teeny chapter about nutrition, because at the time that he wrote that long ago, he didn't care. He was young, and the same today. I see podcasts about fitness where they will talk about the workout. Usually, it's a Navy SEAL, and they talk about how hard he works out or what kind of extreme sport he did. Almost nothing about diet, except I eat a lot of meat. That's the main thing. But very little about nutrition, which I think is a huge part of it.
Nutrition is key. I cover very little about it, and I cover very little about specific exercise, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Because the book in itself is addressed to everybody at a personal level, and everybody has different needs. So if we produce something which is prescriptive, and we've had that in the past, but basically making our idea of fitness fit into the life of somebody whom we don't really know. We don't know their desires, we don't know what their aims are, their goals, or their past history, or what they want for themselves in the future. So basically the book I wrote allows you to understand your who you are really, and this is difficult for most people, and then you understand your why. And if you understand who you are, then you begin to understand why you want to exercise. Why is fitness necessary for you? And the answer is going to be different for everybody. We have been conditioned to think of fitness as an external aspect of ourselves, where it's defined by perhaps big muscles, six-pack, very, very sort of pop culture-driven images, which have been reinforced time and again. And this is a trap, because fitness is not that. And certainly when we look at hunter-gatherers, I mean, they're lean for sure, but they haven't got big muscles, and they have phenomenal endurance. They have significant strength because it's functional strength. It's designed to help them in that environment. So the book helps you understand why you want to be fit. And if you understand really why you want to be fit, then this is what happens. Your emotional connection to what is required to do or to be done in order for you to reach that level that you want changes. And it's emotionality that actually drives every decision we make. We are emotional machines that think, not thinking machines that feel. We sort of act on emotions and then we apply logic afterwards. So if we make that connection emotionally to who we are and why we want to be fit, not just now, but forever, which means that we're going to evolve our idea, we're going to evolve what we're doing, then the value we attach to what we're seeking changes, which means then that our ingrained aversion to exercise also changes. Because, it's a value equation, right? Value judgment.
Uh-huh.
If you think, for instance, if you tell me, hey, listen, you know what I want to do? I want to look great this summer, which is like a few months away. And I'll say, great, we have this really hard program and this really strict diet. And if you follow the program and do the diet, you're going to look great this summer. But if it's something which is not really ingrained in how you feel about yourself, it's just something which, you superficially or sort of abstractly think about, 1 month in, you're going to tell me, oh, this program is killing me. And this diet, what the heck? And I totally get that. That's why
I love this post. One of the actors from a show called Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I love that one.
Yeah. So he wanted to get really fit. I've noticed he stayed fit, but he wanted to get really fit partly for a bit on the show, but also, for to be a movie star. And he said, it's easy. It's really easy to give it. Anyone can do this. First of all, you hire a trainer, and it's great if your next door neighbor happens to be a movie star also, and he has like the best trainer in the world. Then you hire nutritionists, and it's great if another neighbor has this really good nutritionist that's the best in the world. And he just goes on. Oh, and then you starve yourself, and you hate everything for months because you can't eat. I just loved his, he was just being completely realistic about this is the reality of getting a six pack. Right?
There's a grain of truth, there's a significant grain of truth to this. I mean, if you had a nutritionist, a psychologist, and a personal trainer attached to you at all times throughout your life, you'd be the perfect human being. Right?
Sure.
You'd be inside and out, you'll be finely tuned throughout your life. But then you have those three people fine-tuning you as you go. And none of us have those three people, right? And even movie stars don't have them throughout their life. They'll have them for a bit, for something very specific, and those people go away because they cost a lot, and also, you can't live your life like that. But we have to then be ourselves, our own personal trainer, our own nutritionist, our own coach, our own psychotherapist in these situations. And in order to do that, we need to understand how we function. Because, it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to put down a program and I'm going to follow it. Well, countless of millions of people every year start off the program and a resolution.
With their New Year's, their New Year's resolution.
And we know the statistics, right? We know that within 4 weeks, 50% have dropped off. And within 6 weeks, another 20% drop off. By the time we get to 12 weeks, which is 3 months from January, about 15% have stuck it out. That's crazy, right?
It is really crazy. And it's the idea of figuring out why you want to be fit and having your own personal goals. It makes a lot of sense because people probably like yourself and definitely me, when I even the fact I do try and exercise every day. Like, I love exercise. I really miss going to the gym all the time. And not everyone is like that. Not everyone's wired that way. So there has to be different solutions for different people. Yeah.
Well, everybody's to some degree wired the same way. So when you say, I love going to the gym, what you've done essentially for yourself, and this is commendable, you worked out why you want to work out. So it doesn't matter how difficult it's going to be, the feeling which you get because you've done it, and of course the after effects from a neurochemical point of view, because we have all these endorphins and dopamines going through our system, and which activate our reward system in the brain, they reinforce your original intent. So for you, it's great.
Right.
Most people haven't. But to get there, you've done a lot of work, I suspect, internally. And if it's not been a conscious thing where you sat down and did it, you've done it subconsciously throughout your life because it's how you operate. But a lot of people can't do that. So we have to start from, absolute basics. And in Build to Last, I give them a plan on how to do that. I say, if I was to start understanding my who and my why,
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
in who am I and why do I want to get fit? How do I go about it? And I tell them, this is what you do. This is the first step. This is the second step. This is the third step. And then, then you work that out, and you need to feel that. Don't just write down, pipe dreams, because everybody can do that.
Right,
So,
right. Don't write down six-pack abs.
in 3 weeks.
Yeah, in three, right. And it's interesting. You brought that up a while ago, but it's always interesting to me that that's such a goal for people now. And I don't think there's like three or four people anywhere that let you know, hey, those are from dieting. I don't care how much you work out. If you have fat on your body, you will never see your abs. And then there's the other factor that, if you are born that way, a lot of athletes are born like that's how they look. And that's a big factor too. Their abs happen to be bigger. They happen to have larger, more defined muscles. That's usually the people that go into sports and almost always the people that go into the sport of bodybuilding. They didn't start out really, super skinny and not able to put on muscle.
I'm glad you brought up the six-pack thing, however, because there's a genetic element to it in terms of how many segments you have in the front part of your abdominal muscle. So you can have 4, 6, or 8. Some people have an 8-pack. Now that's genetics, right? So you can't do anything about it. You can do millions and millions of crunches. If you only have a 4-pack, you're only going to have a 4-pack, right? It's not going to be a 6-pack suddenly.
Right.
But
I have a 1-pack
that's
currently.
No, that's defined by genetics. But then there's the other element that essentially there's a certain amount of subcutaneous fat covering our abdominal muscles, and they stop them being defined. Now, it's a very strong muscle in the body. We use them pretty much all the time. We walk and we sit, we run and we lift. We use our abdominal muscles. So if you take somebody who is not classically trained and we drop their body weight to a certain percentage in fat, well, they're going to have whatever segments the genetics determine.
Right.
4-pack or 6-pack or 8-pack.
Whatever. Yeah.
So really, we all have them, right? They're not visible because of that. And to make them visible, we need always low body fat. And then obviously, if we're working in bodybuilding or if somebody's a professional athlete, those muscles will grow to some extent larger and become more visible.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because I did Pilates for a while and actually taught Pilates. And really, that's all about your core. You're working on your core, for an hour every day or however many times a week you do it. You're working on your core, but that's not going to give you a 6-pack unless you get really thin and unless you drop body fat to a certain level. And some people at that level of body fat are going to have a hard time like getting out of bed.
Yes.
It can really be depleting. I've even heard actors doing movies that are trying to get a 6-pack talk about how debilitating it is trying to be on set for 12 hours when they're not eating. When they're only eating really, really low fat foods, which is it's interesting.
And that brings us to the other thing. Essentially, our bodies are fine-tuned by evolution to have all these things, right? We need to have carbohydrates in our bloodstream because we need those sugars to be broken down so they can produce adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP for short. And every cell in the body uses ATP as fuel, right? That's what it does. So carbohydrates are our primary source of fuel for that. And then we have the secondary one, which is fat. And fat in itself does more than just be fuel. The human body is so complex, there's no part of it that only does one thing. So the muscles we have also produce hormones and send signals to the brain and send signals to the microbiome in our gut to produce different kind of neurotransmitters. The bones we have, which are a scaffolding for the body and the way the muscles work against them so we can propel ourselves in 3D space, are also responsible for brain health through specific calcium ions which they produce, which help the brain remain sharp and healthy. So the same with fat in the body, it's also an organ. So when you lose that organ, because you drop it down to levels that are unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So you're basically, what are you doing? You're unbalancing the body. You no longer have homeostasis. So now we're not really balanced. So we're constantly fighting some kind of battle. So if you say somebody's, like actors, where they have to starve themselves to have that specific look for a very specific goal, and I think it's always admirable. At the same time, it's no different to fighting a severe cold. It impairs you in so many different ways, because it impairs the way that the body uses the energy it has. It impairs the way it produces hormones and how they basically activate different parts of us, including our brain. And then it impairs the way that the body deals with food.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's seems to be a lot of confusion about that in the world of nutrition and working out and stuff like that. There's a lot of different ideas out there, and I think a lot of them are maybe not based on science. So I like to hear, a scientific approach to that. But since you do look like you're in really good shape, I think it said I believe in my research, I saw that you do martial arts you've done martial arts your whole life, right? And
I've done martial arts since I was 13. And I must always say that the look we achieve externally, big muscles, six pack, whatever, right? We have athletes, top world-class athletes, as our icons for fitness. Okay, that look is a byproduct of functionality, right? If we did what they did, we'd all look the same. It's that simple, right? So, and this is where other things come in, right? And in my case, it's no exception. When we do something very specific to a very high extent, we are willing to willingly put ourselves in a stressful situation, physically, mentally, and as a result of that, psychologically. And the reason we do that is always emotional. And it usually comes from a coping mechanism of some kind.
Oh, interesting.
So we look at, because, it's no different to people who, and I'm drawing a connection here, which is not always obvious, but it's no different to people who self-harm, where they use pain to control part of their life, which they feel they have no control over. It's no different to people who use alcohol, which is also a means of self-harm as a coping mechanism, or food, which is a psychoactive substance, which we can indulge in to temporarily feel better and take the pressure off things which we feel we can't control. So for me, it's always, it was always physical exercise since I was 13. And I came across it by accident. I channeled my angst and anger and everything else into that. And it worked. So, and I did it to a very high degree, a very high level. I competed for 10 years. I've got a black belt in 3 different martial arts styles. I still train every day.
Which one?
One stage of my life. Oh, I've got a black belt in WTF Taekwondo. I've got a black belt in Wadoryu Karate, and I've got a 2nd degree black belt in ITF Taekwondo, and I'm a certified instructor in that.
I asked because I did martial arts when I was younger, like a couple different times in my life. I did karate, like traditional karate, and then I did a kung fu, like it was a mixed martial arts before there was such a thing. And so it was the Ed Parker system was, I think, the first thing I did. You might be old enough to remember Ed Parker. He was a 10th degree black belt and minor star. And then when I lived in Los Angeles for a bit, I literally did, it was karate, aikido, boxing, and judo. And it was it was kind of combined into one class, and there was no mixed martial arts at that time.
No,
it
but
was
it's different disciplines merging together. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the instructor was like yourself. He had black belts in several different things. So he just kind of mixed the class. You would start out doing pretty traditional karate exercises, and then you'd move to the heavy bag and literally do boxing, 3-minute boxing rounds, and you'd practice judo and aikido with doing the katas and different things and exercising with each other, and then you'd spar, and it was hands. It was what did it call, partial contact sparring, and the instructor was always, well, you hit him as hard as you want to be hit.
Yes,
Go,
that's right. Yeah.
go
Okay.
ahead and hit him as hard as you want to get hit back.
Yeah, that's actually
So,
very good. Okay,
yeah,
because essentially, you spar in a controlled environment, and
yeah,
usually you
yeah,
look out for each other, right? So you're not trying
right.
to kill each other. You want to score a point. But also you don't want to hurt anybody. So it's quite something that. So I'm very glad you had that experience, and what you're actually describing is it's quite magical, because having that kind of mix in one environment breaks free with some of the uh, I'm reticent to use the word problems, but they are problems. The hierarchical problems with traditional martial arts, where we do things blindly without asking why. We have this, and because it's always been done this way. But the moment you mix styles, then you begin to realize that everybody's a little bit different physically, and then you begin to work to your strengths, and then you begin to adapt to other things, which makes you, for lack of a better words, better in what you're doing biomechanically. And
Oh
then you
yeah,
realize
yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
And then you
Yeah.
realize that you can't change physically, really, because you're going to hit a block at some point if you don't change mentally.
That's well, and
Yes.
I mean, martial arts is mental. It's not. That's what people take a long time to get. We also did a little bit of Tai Chi, and one of
Oh,
my
perfect.
instructors said the difference between Tai Chi and karate is karate starts out pretty fast, and the more you progress, kind of the slower it will become. You don't, and then Tai Chi starts out really slow, and the higher you progress, the faster and more sort of lethal it will become. But that's way up there in
Yes.
the way up there in the scale. I always thought that was interesting. And you also can't really spar with Aikido.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
hard,
that's very
very
true.
hard to spar with Aikido.
Yes.
Found that out
But
too. It's interesting.
it's so important that, and that internal growth is
Hmm.
basically what drives a lot of the external things that we then achieve. And I think going from your examples straight off, this is something that's again not very well understood in today's world. We think of fitness, right? I need to get stronger or get faster,
It's
or perhaps
people doing yoga. Yoga comes from yogis who were
yes,
studying to become enlightened, and they did the
yes,
physical exercise as part of that. And then it comes to the Western world, and not never. I rarely hear people talking about that aspect of it. I think a lot of people
mm,
say namaste and have no idea what that word means.
that is so correct. And that's the things which, and again, in today's world, if we think about fitness, I mean, we live in the 21st century, so it's not.
Right.
I grew up
It's
through
yeah.
the 70s, right, and the 80s, where we really didn't know the effect of the brain on the body, or the effect of imagery we use in our head to what we actually achieve physically. We didn't know that psychology is linked intimately with movement and our connection to the world around us. We didn't know any of those things.
Right.
So
We knew the connection
now
of
we,
the weed to the brain. That's about it.
yeah,
70s.
yes, yes, that's right. And today we know all those things. We know that, if you are depressed, exercise is the best thing you can do for yourself. We know that if you move your body, then it changes your brain. We know if
Yeah.
you take a really deep breath and fill up your lungs and really oxygenate your bloodstream, the brain stem in the center of our head, at the very base of our brain, moves by 5 centimeters.
Oh, that's amazing. Because I do this. I try and do this several times a day. In the morning, I try and do it for a bit of time, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes. But throughout the day, it's amazing what taking a breath will do for you.
Yes,
Just taking a
and
breath. I don't
and
know.
and you can almost. I mean, we haven't got nerves in our brain. We don't feel anything from it. But you take a deep
Right,
breath and you can almost feel
right.
something from it, and it's that movement, right, inside it. So these are the things which we know today, and because we know them, we're ideally placed to essentially put together for ourselves individually, because everybody will work with these tools differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, a sort of like an armor, if you like, of things which we can employ to help us protect our body and our brain from the world, the external world, which stresses us out. Because it's complex, because it's not really made for us, because we still have to navigate it. Because no matter how hard we try and who we are, we can never truly control it. We can't. So the things which we can control are ourselves, our emotional regulation, our thinking, our bodily reactions, the way we manage the stress that we will feel, and we will always feel some stress in connection to the environment and external factors. So those tools are there for us. And we need to understand that. We need to actually start thinking, okay, if I feel stressed, what should I do? If my day is bad, what should I do? If I want to get fitter, what should I do? And we need to be smart about it. We shouldn't think, okay, you need the equivalent of a complex plan which is unworkable. You can't say to yourself, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to work out for an hour and a half every day, when you haven't done any of this kind of thing. Or when you have a complex life, where your job is difficult, your family life is difficult, and you know you're not going to get that hour and a half every day. That's unrealistic. You're setting yourself up to fail. So we create these obstacles in our head. They'll say, okay, I don't have an hour and a half, what can I do? And we give up. And you say, well, you don't need an hour and a half. What do you need? Have you got 10 minutes? Have you got 15 minutes? Have you got 1 minute? And the question always is, well, what will 1 minute do? Well, this is what we know. The moment we start moving our body, the moment we start exercising, a large number of neurochemical reactions take place in our bloodstream. They will happen irrespective of whether we exercise for a single minute or a whole hour. And because they happen, they impact our organs throughout the body, and they change our hormonal profile. And hormones are part of the neurotransmitters that control our moods, they control our responses at an emotional level, and then they activate or deactivate centers of the brain which respond to external stimuli from the environment. So that's 1 minute a day, if we do only that, because that's all we're capable of. That's the only capacity we have.
Right.
If we do it for a year, at the end of the year, we're going to be physically, mentally, and psychologically better than what we were at the beginning of it. Even though it will not have moved the markers of our biomechanical fitness significantly. We're not going to have massive muscles or six-pack or be super athletic, but we will be fitter in every sense of the word.
So a minute a day, I think what you're saying is, if you only had a minute a day, that would do more than no minutes a day.
Yes, absolutely.
It's going to do something, and it definitely will do more than, maybe it'll do less than 5 minutes a day, but if you start with a minute, you'll want to add another minute in no time, right? That's what I know.
Exactly.
From experience.
It's a gateway, what you're saying, right?
You're right. It's a gateway fitness.
Yes.
Yeah.
and these are the smart ways to actually operate in a world that is difficult to operate in anyway. Okay, I mean, we live in a very complex world. It is not going to get any easier. The complexities will only increase. Technology is rising constantly around us. If we're not constantly chasing things and evolving with it, which is stressful, what happens? We feel we get left behind and we don't understand the world we're in anymore. Also stressful.
Yes.
So it's like being between a rock and a hard place. You say to yourself, okay, do I do nothing and feel stressed and cut off and being left behind? Do I do everything I can to keep up with things? Get stressed because things are constantly changing sometimes on a daily basis. And the answer to this is that you should always work on yourself. You should always work on your own coping mechanism.
That's probably a better answer than go live in a cabin and see what's here in 5 years when I come back.
Yeah, that is no answer. So yeah, absolutely.
That's the idea I've been having lately for some reason. I don't know what it is. I just thought, but if I went somewhere where no one's got any, where I don't have internet, what would it be like in 5 years?
Funny you should say that. Yeah, I mean, we all feel the need sometimes to unplug. This is a very healthy kind of reaction because by unplugging, essentially, we reduce the stimuli that we receive, and we allow our baseline values in our body and our brain to sort of recalibrate to some extent. But here's a funny thing, right? I was discussing something with a writer friend back about 2 years ago during the pandemic. And he was in Scotland, and his family had a wood cabin in the woods, right?
So,
He was in the family, yeah. So he told me, when this is over, because he lives in Edinburgh, I'm going to go there for 6 months and I'm going to write. And, I knew that he wasn't really going to do it. It was a reaction to the pandemic and all the stress and everything.
Uh-huh.
But here's the thing, though. If he had done that, where he cuts himself off from the world, and he's surrounded by an idyllic environment, right? Beautiful views, pretty quiet, nobody bothers you. Are you going to be more creative? No. Are you going to write anything meaningful? No. Are you going to be more insightful? No. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to know more about trees and views and the wind and, those things. Why? Because essentially who we are, how we think, is the external world. We think with our brains, but we actually use the world to think. And if we cut ourselves off from the world, then our brains stop thinking, stop evolving, stop understanding. And when you said, it's nice to cut ourselves off occasionally, brilliant. What are we doing then? We are doing that exactly. We're cutting ourselves off from the world. Our need to be constantly stressed because things are happening goes down because we don't know what's happening. Our need to constantly worry about the future because uncertainties increase around us begins to go down because we're not aware of those uncertainties. And we recalibrate and recharge, which is beautiful. But we can't function without the world around us, whatever that world is for everybody. So we need that world to function and evolve.
Right. Well, possibly, unless you want to go on a long silent retreat. But after I did my sugar fast, I did a social media fast, a phone fast. So I just wanted to put my phone down, mainly to see if I could do it, because I stumbled on some articles, cruising the internet, about how damaging it is the way we use our phone, how damaging it is for our psyche, like how stupid it's making us, basically. And there's so much that you don't need to look at. So basically, first I just tried not using it. I had only one day of like 8 minutes, and that was literally looking at the weather and something else. And I had a good month of less than an hour, most days 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. It made a huge difference. And the majority of what I was not looking at, I wasn't missing anything. It wasn't like I wasn't looking at stuff going on. I was still doing stuff I do on the internet with friends. I was still interacting with people. I still had email, all that kind of thing. I was just putting down what's kind of become the screaming, the screaming and yelling and that kind of thing.
I think what you did, again, first of all, commendable. Secondly, hugely difficult.
Hugely difficult. I had no idea.
It's like a sugar fast.
We
are hardwired to seek sugar because we need it in terms of energy. And in the wild, it will give us a massive jolt of energy which we wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And we needed that. And our brain is also hardwired to seek information.
Oh, right.
Why is it hardwired to seek information? Because it only has one line of code. And the line of code, essentially, is to help us survive. And in order to help us survive, it has to do the impossible. It has to be able to predict the next moment. If we can predict the next moment and we know what's coming, we know how to react, we know how to plan, uncertainty drops, and our survival is guaranteed. To do that, we create everything you see, including this connection we're having right now. The wrapper of technology, internet, civilization, rules, regulations, legal system, monetary system, all those things which lead to all those interactions, which allow us today, in the 21st century, to wake up in the morning and feel a certain degree of certainty that if we step out of the house, nobody's going to murder us for our clothes, nobody's going to try and eat us, we don't have to go and form a tribe to fight off another tribe, we don't have to do any of those things, right?
Right.
So we achieved all those things based on that one line of code, survive, and the prime directive, which is predict the next moment. And now here's where it trips us out. Just like our drive for sugar in the modern world has us basically becoming addicted to all these high sugar foods which are bad for us. In the modern world, our thirst for information can also lead us to become addicted to screen time, where we basically absorb everything without any kind of filter or any kind of grading system on what is important and what isn't, simply because it's there and simply because it's easy. Just like
simply
sugar,
because
right?
it's there. And I've seen a lot of articles about how especially the social media sites are there to make you angry, because that's what makes people stay tuned in, which is interesting. And I try and I try and tailor it. Like, if there's people I'm following that I don't like what they're saying, I try to just, take them off my list and just follow people. But it's still designed to make you, and I've noticed it's getting worse. It's actually getting worse.
It's designed to elicit an emotional response.
Well, yeah. I guess for me it's anger, but yeah, you're right.
Well, for most people, the easiest response to respond to is anger, because basically that leads us to an immediate reaction. If it's something which is different to anger, then it's more complicated. It requires more thinking. We go through a evaluation system. We tend to react differently. So if you and I were running a media platform, we'd want people to stay and be engaged. And the easiest way to keep them there is to emotionally agitate them. And we can only do that if we make them angry about things.
Right.
In a nice way.
It's unfortunate, because there are new social medias trying to kind of come up, trying to fill a certain void. And I see people saying, well, I've been on this one forever, and why would I, that other platform is really boring. Well, it's boring because it's not trying to piss you off every day.
Yeah, it's like the food was bland. It had low fat, no sugar, and low salt, right?
It's like that, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. All right, let's use that analogy because it's perfect, and I'm so glad you brought it up. If we use that bland food, which is better for us, what happens is, over a week or 2 weeks, we recalibrate the taste cells in our tongue, which are used to high salt, high sodium, high sugar, high fat. So when you give them something, well, they don't respond to it because they're used to high content. But after a couple of weeks, then they begin to understand different flavors. You begin to understand what nutritious food tastes like. And then you begin to understand how it makes you feel. So we change like that. Social media is no different. It's another human behavior, another human activity, which is essentially driven by the same drives that we have had in the past, which are translated now through a different medium. We want to connect. We want to know. We want to be in the know. And we feel that we can contribute through our own reaction, because either we want to feel that we're contributing or we want to feel that we belong. These are fundamental drives. The same way that we approach fitness, we can approach pretty much everything in our life. We ask the who and we ask the why. Who are you?
That's good.
Really?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? Again, right? So you see something on the internet and it really gets to you. It doesn't matter what it is. You get fired up. You have this emotional response inside you. Now you need to take action, because basically that's what that connection, that emotional connection in your body leads to the neurochemistry in your brain, which is going to lead you into some kind of decision which will lead to an action. And you got to say, okay, why do I have to do that then? Why? If you understand your why, then you're in a better place to say, okay, I'm not going to do this because my mental health is more important to me than some rando on the internet doing rubbish who I'm going to set straight now, right?
This is great, because I have been trying to kind of decide whether or not to do a rant video about the political situation we're in right now. And this helps me say, it's not going to help me.
Significantly warring, right?
It's a big thing. But where I'm at, I mean, it'll just bring more anger my way. So that's kind of a good, what is my why is not big enough. I don't have a big enough reason for doing that. I mean, I do want to figure out a way to solve this problem.
That's very healthy. And I think, and I'm the same. I see things on the internet which I deeply disagree with. And I think, okay, I've got two choices here. Because like everybody else, I feel that emotional response to what I'm seeing. And it's very real, right? The experience inside you, it's there. And now you need to control it. You need to deal with it. And I've got to say, okay, if I respond, is it going to solve anything? And if the answer is no, I won't do it. Is it going to make me feel better? It's unlikely, because when you're responding from an emotional, from an emotionally elevated position, so you're agitated, you are really just venting, right? So you're not thinking critically yourself. And also the way you present things, because you can't help it, is going to only make other people feel worse. So either you're getting some toxicity out of your system, and it's out there,
and then it's out there. I'm trying to come from more of an angle of supporting the people I agree with, either with a click or a supportive comment or something, rather than just trying to argue with the people I don't.
Again, I think you're displaying your own ability to be introspective and understand how to function in that environment, which is, again, it's commendable. Not many people do that. So you got to say, okay, what can I do here? What is the reasonable thing? If I add a click here and support this positive point of view, that's great. I'm helping move the needle tiny little bit in that direction. If I don't respond to something negative and I don't get into that fight, it'll make me feel better, and I'm not actually pouring oil in the fire. I mean, this is, it's a very disciplined approach you have. It's highly commendable. And again, I think it comes from a place where you thought about it and you begin to understand your own reactions. And I think we can all benefit from that. It's our who and our why. You need to understand. We all need to understand who are we really inside.
Yeah, that's a big one too, is understanding your own reaction. Because I just before I came on, I glanced at an article about anger is really temporary insanity. And it's about how the Stoics handled anger. And I thought, it really is. I mean, the anger gets people in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
You get angry as you're in a youth, you do all kinds of stupid things. And it's a
funny emotional response, anger, because from a neurochemical perspective, a neuroscientific perspective, it's essentially the brain's response to a sense of victimization. So if you see, for instance, something which you think is massively unjust, and you're not responding to the abstract notion of justice, you're responding to the theoretical, but perhaps also practical idea that if this is happening out there, it may impact you, and you'll be in the same situation where you are not experiencing a just thing. So you are becoming a victim here. You may respond to something which attacks your belief system or your value system. All those things make you feel victimized. And if we feel victimized, essentially our stress levels go up, cortisol rises in the bloodstream. Our organs begin to feel not so good inside us.
Yeah.
And chronically, over time, this leads to bad health outcomes. So the body then has this response where anger turns the victim into an aggressor. And you said it's a kind of madness. Not a lot of critical thinking goes in our response. It's lightning fast. It's really quick. We tend to vent. And it happens when it reaches a particular point. I mean, something might make you a little bit angry, but that's nothing, right? It just irritates you. But if you become angry, this is what happens. In our brain, specific centers in the brain accumulate positively charged ions. And then the moment a particular threshold is reached, they fire. Now, there's no neuron that fires halfway. It either fires or it doesn't. So when anger happens, that's why it's so uncontrollable. That's why it's a madness. There are not a lot of safeguards in our response, because we got fired up. We failed to control it by dampening it down. The critical threshold was reached. Neurons fired in our brain, and now we're reacting. and we have no control over that.
And that's really a really good explanation, and it's why if I can control my anger, I have a lot of friends that are good at this. The comments sections can be really entertaining on different posts. I mean, if you just take it as pure entertainment, because you can see that that's what people are doing before they comment. That's what's happening, and they're not waiting. They're not thinking about it. They're just commenting, and it can be
it's crazy.
Nuts. It's absolutely crazy. It's crazy. I mean, one of my big hobbies is flight simulator. I do I do a flight simulator stream and different things. So it breaks a lot because I don't know why. The programmers, it's a hard program to make work all the time. And so the people get so like angry. We're always saying, look, it's a game, folks. It's this isn't a real thing. This is not the thing to get angry about. And it happens to me too. I catch myself, but it's like, wow, come on.
I'll tell you something about flight simulators now that you mentioned that, because when I was writing 2 books ago, during 2016, I brought out The Sniper Mind. The Sniper Mind is a breakthrough book. It took me like 3.5 years to research and write. I interviewed about 100 snipers from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
It had a lot of neuroscience. Essentially, it's a book which shows how snipers think critically under pressure, what parts of the brain they employ, what skill sets they employ, and what we can learn from that for ourselves, both in a business environment, but also in a personal one. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because there was a study done by by NASA back in 2014, where they took two different sets of middle-aged people who had small visual problems, and they put them into 2 different groups. One group was given a flight simulator and told them, you're gonna play this game, and it was a military flight simulator. So you're in a cocoon, you have the whole thing, and you're seeing the screen and everything, and you have fighter plane. The other group, they were told, you guys are fighter pilots. So they gave them the uniform, they gave them the headset, with thing, and they went to the same game, right? But this time, these guys were in character because they're in costume. And this is what they noticed, that their vision improved.
Oh, that's crazy. Wow.
Because, yes.
Maybe I should start wearing a costume. Some of the people who, some of the people who stream the simulator, they'll come in with a leather helmet on and stuff. Never gone quite that far, but that's crazy.
They noticed that they were able to, without visual aids, so they were not wearing glasses, they were able to pick out the outline of approaching aircraft against a horizon or a sky, against clouds, and they actually showed increased and improved visual acuity.
Just from playing the role, basically.
Yes, but they were in the role. In that moment, they were that.
Their mind was that's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So it's fascinating because, that shows there are unplumbed and underused resources in the brain, which significantly affect the performance of the body. And we are really bad at reaching them, really, and using them. We are very good at listening to the negative self-talk in our head that always tells us we're not good enough, we are not fast enough, we're not smart enough, we just should not be here. And we are willing to accept that, as opposed
It's interesting because I don't know why, and I've heard this from a lot of different sources, some of them gurus, some of them psychologists, that why do we listen to negative self-talk? Why do we accept that easier than, it's true, especially with, I'm an actor and an entertainer.
There is an explanation now for that. We have neuroscientific data. Now, this is what happens. We have 2 things here that happen in the brain. First of all, the negative self-talk is an evolutionary trait, which allowed us to survive. So when we lived in caves, and we lived in tribes, and those tribes and those caves were the only protection we had against a hostile environment.
Well, I remember that.
Yes, yesterday. Well, The guy would get his club and say to his to his teammates or fellow tribes people, "Hey guys, I'm gonna go and see what's over that mountain in the horizon." Okay, the guy who decided to do that, in his head, he had a little voice that said, "You know what? You don't know what's over there. You're gonna be on your own. You're gonna have to go through a terrain. There may not be food, no water. All these things were up." And that guy who ignored that voice in his head maybe didn't come back, and he did not reproduce.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So the guy who
That
actually
makes a lot of
stayed, because
sense. Yeah.
he stayed and survived, and he passed that trait on. Now, here's what happens at a neurochemical level, at a cellular level, when we have that negative self-talk. Because our negative self-talk produces a negative image, which is a negative value, which needs to be stored somewhere and create some kind of imagery, which then guides the decision-making. The energy that's required to do all that is significantly less than the energy required to do the opposite. So if you and I are saying, if we're those tribes people, and you're telling me, "Hey, David, listen, we're going to go over there." And I have a negative self-talk, but you don't, right? And I say, "No, Joel, it could be no water, no food, enemy tribes people, wild animals, we don't know what's up." Okay, you'll have now to tell me, "No, you know what? Maybe we'll find plenty of food over there, and we're going to come with a mountain, it'll be an oasis." Okay, the imagery you're trying to produce, in order for it to stay in my head, requires more energy from my brain than actually a negative image I just told you.
That's interesting. That's why people use the talking in the mirror, I guess, to get themselves pumped up for something.
Trying to get snap out of it.
Yeah.
And again, it's a survival trait, because, of the two of us, suppose you went off and I stayed behind because you didn't convince me and you didn't come back. But I stayed and reproduced. So again, the ability of the brain to have negative states which are energetically lower than positive ones is a survival mechanism, which is a leftover from the past.
That's interesting, because what about the one who went over the hill and he didn't come back because he found just a much nicer group of people?
Right. And that's why we have the occasional born optimist who is not daunted by anything. Mm-hmm. He faces the greatest challenge in his life with no resources, no skill set, and he says, "Oh, it's going to be okay." Because, some did make it. So that trait didn't vanish.
Oh, yeah. I'm always admire people like that.
These are traits which it's the past talking to us in the present. And these are the things we need to understand. We need to understand that a lot of the times when we catastrophize, which is what all negative talk is, we're putting ourselves down, we're thinking the worst. Okay, you got to think, in today's world, if I do this and I fail, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm not going to be eaten by a tiger. I'm not going to be killed by enemy tribes people. I'm not going to starve to death. I'm just going to fail at something which I tried at, and for whatever reason, I didn't make it.
Right.
You have to quantify that, to reappraise the values that our brain automatically gives us.
Well, like with me now, I'm always thinking if I try too hard physically, that I might hurt myself again and not be able to sleep for weeks at a time. And that possibility is pretty low, but it keeps me from doing things. Yeah. Yeah,
your brain is trying to protect you, trying to protect the integrity of your body. So it's got the best intentions in mind when it's actually doing that. And you need to say, okay, you've worked with your body all your life.
Yeah.
You understand how your biomechanics work. You're an expert on you. So you understand where the limits lie. So you need to basically have that self-talk, like a coach almost. You'll say, okay, listen, I know what I'm doing. We're going to do this, and it's going to be safe. And then you do it. But you need to have that talk. It's not automatic. So what do you face then? You face the negative part of you, which is like instant. And then the self-coach you have to put in place, energetically higher. And you got to say, listen, Joel, you're experienced. You know what you're doing. You're not going to go crazy. You're not going to do anything that will hurt you. And you know where to stop. So
Are you
this
sure?
is how we're going to do it.
You guarantee I'm not going to go crazy. Okay.
Well, I think I can guarantee that as much as for anybody, really. So there you go.
I wonder sometimes. Oh, geez. Well, look, I think I'm really enjoying this conversation, but I think
too.
we should do it again, is what I think we should do.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah,
that'd be great.
I just realized, we've been talking for about an hour. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been talking for at least an hour, and there's so much more to cover because you have a lot of books. I mean, I would love to talk to you.
Too.
I'd love to talk to you.
I don't get out much.
Yeah,
that's why
you don't get out much. And I didn't get into a lot of things that I kind of meant to ask you about. But I think we should do that in another session, another podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm willing to do that. I had a lot of fun here.
That'd be great. Because once I get to I'm almost to my 100th episode. Well, I'm about 11 away. And then I think I'm going to start repeating guests again. I've had a few on more than once, but yeah. So then I'll be trying to ask people back. I really appreciate you reaching out once again. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say the thing. Oh, you've been listening to Were You Still Talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and I've been talking to David Amerland. We've been talking a bit about Built to Last, his latest books, and a lot about all kinds of things. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining in. There will be links in the description if you want to find out more about all this stuff. Many, many links. And I appreciate you listening. Be sure, hit the like button, hit the follow button, whatever you do on whatever podcast aggregator you're on. Thanks a lot for listening, and we will see you next time. So, be good to each other and be good to yourselves. That's what this whole podcast was about.